Faith. And today is a super popular topic. We're going to talk about money. Praise the Lord, everyone shouted. But nonetheless, this is a aspect of Abraham's life. And we are supersizing our faith by studying the various sacrifices of faith, steps of faith that Abraham took to become the man of God that's now listed in the New Testament as an example for Christians, which is unusual because he's an Old Testament character. I need two readers. Someone to get Luke 17:5 and James 2:23. Who wants to get those for us? Mike, why don't you get Luke 17:5? Who's going to get James 2:23? Natalie. So why don't you go ahead and read. So today we're looking at giving yourself to giving. But first we're going to do a review from last week. Go ahead, Mike.
And the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith.
Okay, increase our faith. This is a prayer request of the apostles. Jesus gave an interesting answer to. James 2:23. Abraham, the friend of God, a person that's mentioned in the Gospels and in James's epistle and in Paul's epistle to the Hebrews as an example, someone we're supposed to look to figure out how to live the life of faith. How can we as Christians increase our faith? How is it that faith is increased? Do we pray and ask God for more, or is there another answer? Who wants to tackle that one? Mike? We exercise our faith, okay? And so exercising is doing something. It's doing something that will cause us to grow. And so most of us know, because we have a lot of people here who are either athletes or in the military, we know that lifting weights or doing some kind of progressive overload exercise like sprints will cause muscles to grow. You actually don't get more muscles. The muscles you have become bigger. And so this is the idea that by exercising your faith, it will grow. It will not grow by asking God for more. God's given everyone a measure of faith. And in Luke chapter 17, Jesus goes on to say, you only need faith the size of a mustard seed to command a tree to jump into the ocean or whatever, or be uprooted. And so these are the kind of things that ought to make us think, oh, I don't need more faith. I just need to practice using it. How does the principle of giving contribute to supersizing our faith? This is something that came up last week, because all these supersize your faith Bible studies start with the word giving or gave or some version of that. What does giving, how does giving contribute to supersizing? Joe? It demonstrates a trust. Very good. Natalie, you want to add to that? You will receive something. But you don't know what you're going to receive or when you're going to receive it, right? That's where the trust comes in. God is going to do something. There's going to be a reciprocal action on the part of God in response to your faith. Mike?
It's also you're making a sacrifice, conscious decision that you're willing to give up something.
Yeah, at the moment it will seem like a sacrifice, but in the long term it's actually going to be something that will result in blessing. Santiago? Yeah, it's believing that in the end, even though you're making that sacrifice, as Mike properly called it, God's going to supply your needs at the other end. And so think about this. This is, again, a biblical principle that works. And you can actually test God in this. So if you put money in the offering plate today, know you will not get a check on Monday morning from some mysterious source. There's no guarantee. You might, but sometimes if you give in the offering plate this morning, you will find that 20 years from now when you have a need, your kids need money for school, or you need money for medical procedures. You're going to have an unexpected source provide for you, and it is connected to that decision you made to make a sacrifice and trust God. Okay, let's move into this. How did Abraham become a friend of God? This is based on last week's study now, so don't give me some wild guess. What did we talk about last week that made Abraham a friend of God? Nobody knows but Mike. Mike, you can't answer all the questions. Someone else needs to raise their hand. Christian. Okay, but what did we talk about last week specifically and made him a friend of God? Natalie? Yeah, by prayer and drawing close to God. So it's hard to be a friend with someone you never talk to, right? Like, that makes no sense. Like, I don't know this person. That's why your Facebook friends and your social media friends are all fake, right? I know some of them are real friends, but some of them are just strangers that you happen to like the same things as them. And so you're on the same page, and it's like, okay, I'll accept your friend request or your follow request or whatever it might be. And then some people you block because they disagree with you. They think they're rooting for the 49ers, and you're rooting for Dallas. I'm sorry. Oh, I got into somebody's marriage, personal business over there. Or worse, you think Seattle's going to win the Super Bowl this year. Block. Unfriend. But seriously, friends are people that we have a relationship, and our best friends are people that we draw close to. And Abraham drew near to God, and he prayed. He had a regular prayer life that was more than just gimme, gimme, gimme. It was a conversational relationship with God. What caused Abram or Abraham to leave Haran and relocate to Canaan? What specifically caused them? Don't overthink this. What specifically caused them? All right, now Natalie's answering all the questions. Was anybody else here last week? Vincent, I think, was sick, right? But no, that was Wednesday. But yeah, he's going to raise his hand. Go ahead, brother. God told him. Very simple. God said, go. And that's too simple for some of us. But that's nonetheless, that's all God, that's what real Christian obedience looks like. God says it, I believe it, I'm going to do it. How is this comparable to Paul's first mission trip? How is it comparable to Paul's first mission trip? Why did Paul go on his first mission trip? Natalie? God told him to. What a coincidence. How does this compare to our calling? Because the longer you're a Christian, you're going to discover God is going to occasionally nudge you. Go talk to that person about Jesus. Go volunteer for that ministry before Pastor Vaughn tells you. Right? Go, maybe you're called to preach. Go preach the gospel. Go be a missionary. Go. Who knows what God might call you to do? I don't know. But it's always for your benefit, and it's always for the kingdom's benefit. What must we do to be led by God, fulfill our calling, and become a friend of God? Mike? Build that relationship. So what must we do to build that relationship? This is what the whole study was about last week. Santiago? Obey? Well, the problem is none of us obey God perfectly, right? Let me ask you this. If your kids obeyed you as much as you obey God, would you be happy with your kids? So, I wish that was the answer, but unfortunately, we're not very good at obeying God most of the time. Thank God for his grace. Can you say amen? Vincent? Having a prayer life. That's where this really is important, that you establish a prayer life with God. He really does want to talk to you. So if you're one of those people who's like, oh, I never heard God talk to me. I question your prayer life. Prayer life isn't just like, you're mad at God all day, so you're talking to him. God, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Ugh. Some people think that's a prayer life, man. And I know sometimes even the best saints are going to have that attitude toward God. But a prayer life is something where you discipline yourself to make time to pray with your conscience, to pray with your rational mind and your in tongues or whatever, in the spirit. Pray out loud, pray to yourself. Different ways to pray, corporate prayer. But you involve yourself in all the types of prayer you can. And there's other things too. How many people know God can't move a parked car? Right? You can't steer a parked car, can you? You can't even turn the wheel of a parked car. And if you do, you won't go anywhere. And so sometimes steps of faith are prayer leads us into baby steps of faith that God can now begin to guide us and direct us. And that's what he wants to do. And finally, who did Abraham intercede for in prayer? We must also intercede for these types of people. John? The lost people of Sodom. So here's a city that's wicked. God's going to destroy it. Yet, we see Abraham interceding in prayer, asking God not to destroy the city. It says, if there's 10 righteous people, would you destroy the city? And God says, I would not destroy the city if there are 10 righteous. That's a pretty nasty city. And we're very quick to judge people and things that we need to pray for. God is trying to get us to pray for these places. And so if you're like me and you're always praying for an asteroid to hit Washington, D.C., that's not a good prayer. Right? I just know it would save the country probably. If we could get rid of all the politicians in one shot, that would really be convenient. But that's actually a wicked prayer. We need to pray for people, even people that we might consider wretched or beyond salvation. We need to believe God for a miracle for them. So you might want to have a list of people you don't like or people that are considered evildoers. If you don't like Donald Trump, why don't you pray for him? All right? If you don't like, the alternative to Donald Trump, whoever that might be in the next election, pray for them. Don't be so quick to get on social media and just blast everybody that doesn't think like you do politically. Right? Be careful about that. Let's go and let's move on from that because I want to get to our lesson today. Let's talk about giving yourself to giving. So a lot of verses here. We're going to study this because we want people to understand the principle that Abraham followed that caused him to be a giver, because that's what we're aiming at, the principle. James chapter 1, verse 17. I need volunteers, please. Raise your hand. Luke, John 3:16, Christian. Ephesians 5:1, Giovanni. Genesis 14:18-20, Diane. Hebrews 7, 1-2, and then verse 4 also, my wife Sue. Hebrews 7:3, Joe Campos. Leviticus 27:32, Kyle McKee. Genesis 28:22, Matthew. Deuteronomy 18:4. Tammy, is that your hand up? I can't tell. There's someone in front of you. Yep. Can you get that one, Deuteronomy 18:4? Galatians 3:16-18, Mike. Genesis 14:21-23, Austin. Matthew 2, verse 1, Natalie, verse 11, Jack. Genesis 15:1. Brother, what's your first name again? Preston. Okay, gosh. All right, I'm going to get it eventually, Preston. This is like the third time I've asked. Genesis 15:1. Why don't you get that, Preston? Philippians 4:14-16. Vincent 17-18. Joe Tuitupo 19-20. Joe Campos. Proverbs 3:9-10. John Davis. Luke 6:38. Christian. Genesis 18:1-3, Josh. 4-5, Santiago. 6-8, Alma. Genesis 18:9-10, Luke. Verse 14, Jack. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 to 7. Someone new that wants to read? Giovanni, why don't you get that? Verse 8, 2 Corinthians 9, verse 8. Luke, verse 9. Natalie, verse 10 to 11. Josh, verse 12. Last one here. Someone who hasn't read? Anyone? Trayvon. 2 Corinthians 9, verse 12. That's the last one. Thank you. Okay, let's look at these. So, James 1:17 and John 3:16.
Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning.
And then John 3:16. All right, very good. So what do these suggest about God's character, his nature? What do these verses suggest about him? Mike?
He's a loving God who wants to bless us.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that? Natalie? He's selfless, okay. Now, it's easy for him to be selfless because he can make something out of nothing. So I don't know if we can actually define God as selfless. It's a good quality. We want to believe God has every good quality, but how about this? He's a giver. So that's his nature. He is a giver. Over and over again, he's giving things for the benefit of mankind. He didn't create the Garden of Eden because it was good for him. He created it because it was good for man. Right? He created women because women are good for man. How many men would agree with me? Right? So he created a lot of things and gave them to people. And we take for granted that things that would come into our life, we somehow earned it, either by working for it or by karma or some weird thing. It's not true. Every good thing you have, including your job, which you may or may not like, but God gave it to you to benefit you. What does this suggest about how believers should be? Joe? We should be givers also. Why? Because of the simple premise that occurs over and over again in the New Testament, but is simplified in Ephesians 5:1. Go ahead and read that. Be imitators of God as dear children. So this is what children do. They copy their parents. So if you're a bad parent or you had a bad parent, you probably struggled with some things. If you've got good examples, it really helps your life. And so we should be imitating God. We have a good example in Jesus Christ of how a man lived for God and imitated God perfectly. Granted, he was divine. But if I imitate Christ, then I'm doing okay. Right? So imitation is necessary because we need examples and models to follow. We don't always get things just because someone tells them to us. Imitating God. God's nature is a giver. That's a hint for us, the way we need to be. And this is terrible because a lot of Christians, literally their whole Christian experience is, people need to help me. Well, we help each other, but guess what? There's a limit to that. If you're not getting on board with helping, you're only on the receiving end all the time, you are not a very good Christian. Right? Cracks me up. People come to church all the time asking for a handout. Like strangers will come to church. Can your church? I get calls from people that go to other churches asking me for money. It's like, what church you go to? I go to such and such church. Why are you calling me for money? Like they think I guess because of TV evangelists, they think all his preachers got like bags of money under the bed. Let me ask you this. Based on how much you give, if you were on the receiving end of how much you give, would you have bags of money under your bed? Had to let that out. Because that just cracks me up. It's like, yeah, I'm really getting rich off your 35 cents you gave last week. But anyways, let's not. I don't want to go down that path too much. I might get stoned before I leave the parking lot today. All right, let's see what the Bible says about this. Some of this stuff. Genesis 14:18 to 20. All right, so what is happening here? Who wants to give a synopsis of what our sister just read? Some of you know the Bible pretty good. You know the story. What's going on here? Mike?
Essentially, Melchizedek, or I guess they went to war, which they really had no.
Synopsis, Mike. Make it quick. I don't need.
God was
Okay, yep.
and so he was giving thanks to the Lord for all the plunder.
Okay, and how did he give thanks?
A tithe.
Okay. He gave a tenth of the spoils. Okay. Very good. And so there's a conflict, and after the conflict's over, he's thankful, and he meets the Melchizedek, this priest, who is a priest of the Most High God. Strangely enough, this priest is worshiping the true God that Abraham worships, and to acknowledge the blessing that came from God, he pays this tithe. Hebrews 7, 1 to 2, and then verse 4. All right, so there's a lot to unpack in this. So Hebrews explains a lot of what's happening in Genesis 14. Paul specifically writes that Melchizedek is referred to as King of Peace, which is a title for Jesus, by the way. So he is a type of Jesus Christ. Hebrews 7:3, read that. All right, very good. So he's made this comparison. What does the word tithe actually mean? What does it actually mean, Austin? A tenth of what? Of what, though? It's your income, yeah. It's income. So it's stuff that comes into your hands. And you have to understand, tithing is about stewardship. It's not about some legalistic thing. It's about stewardship. You are given money and property and things from God, children, and these things don't belong to you. A steward is somebody who has been given something by somebody else to manage. And so the idea is that part of the management is setting some aside to pay for the work of ministry in the earth. In this case, it's Melchizedek. There's another story about Jacob. We're not going to get to that story because there's a lot to unpack in Abraham's life, where Jacob gets a revelation about the tithe while praying at a place called Bethel, which means the house of God. So it's the idea that this is a place where ministry to the true God takes place. But let's look at this definition and unpack that first. Leviticus 27:32.
And concerning the tithe of the herd or the flock of whatever passes under the rod, a tenth one shall be holy to the Lord.
Okay, the 10th one. So 1 out of 10. Genesis 28:22. All right, I will surely give a tenth. This is Jacob's prayer to God. Deuteronomy 18:4. All right, this idea of the first fruit, it's the first 10% that comes in. So people are like, is it net or gross? Look, you let Uncle Sam take more money than God, that's pretty sad. Right? So let's be honest, intellectually honest. It's the gross. It's the first 10%, not what's left over after you spend everything. And so we have to sort this out. It's a trust issue, and it's a stewardship issue. Was Abraham following the law of Moses, the Jewish law, when he tied to Melchizedek? Does anyone know? Saw one person shake his head no back there, Matt. So he's the first one that got the answer right. The answer is no. And this is hilarious to me because some Christians who absolutely do not want to give any money to God when it comes right down to it, they don't want to give anything, never mind 10%. They will say, well, that's in the Old Testament, so it's the law. Not everything in the Old Testament is the law. It's patently ridiculous. It shows how ignorant you are of the Bible to say everything in the Old Testament is the law. The law of Moses, or the law, the Jewish law, did not start until after the Exodus. And it was for the Jewish people, and yes, much of that law is not required to be followed by a Christian. But we're talking about principles that occurred before. That's why in Hebrews and James, and even Jesus, Abraham is used as an example for the Christian, because he's before the law. He was saved by faith. There was no effort on his part to obey some law to be saved. And so this is a very important distinction that is overlooked by many Christians. Galatians 3:16 to 18.
Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He does not say, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to your seed who is Christ. And this I say, that the law which was 430 years later cannot annul the covenant that was confirmed before by God in Christ, that it should make the promise of no effect. For if the inheritance is of the law, it is no longer of promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise.
So that's a very complicated way of saying the law came 430 years after Abraham. None of Abraham's blessings were a result of obedience to the law. And none of ours are either. They're by faith in the promises of God. And so this is a confusion that you still meet people. You got to go to church on Saturday. That's the Sabbath. No, that's not the Sabbath anymore. That's the Jewish Sabbath. It's different today. Or people that say you can't eat, pork. There's Christians going around telling people they can't eat pork. Well, I'll take your share of the bacon then. Right? These are legalisms that cannot save you, right? They cannot save you. Granted, there are some moral choices we should make that are modeled on the law because we are saved now. We're saved for good works. We're not saved by good works. There's a difference. Okay, let's move on from that. Why did Abraham pay tithes to Melchizedek? Why? Well, the very simple answer was out of respect to the man of God. Out of respect for the man's ministry and his person. Genesis 14:21 to 23, and then Matthew 2:1 and then 11. Go ahead and read those.
The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say I have made Abram rich."
So note, he's saying right here, I'm not going to let the king of Sodom take credit for blessing me. The king of Sodom represents the God of this world. Right? It's like you saying, my boss made me rich, not God. Oh, your boss made you rich. No, if you're blessed financially, it's because God provided through your boss. And so if you're going to give, and this is why we tithe. We're showing, nope, this came from God. I'm going to honor God by giving. Matthew 2, verse 1 and then 11.
Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of
Matthew 2, verse 1, and then 11. I give 11 and so on? All right, why did they do this? Who are these guys? Here's the wise men from the east coming to the Christ child. Why did they bring a gift to Jesus? Why did they? Trayvon? Out of respect. They believed he was God's chosen one, a fulfillment of prophecy. And that's how we show respect to God. We bring the gifts out of respect to the house of God, and that's used for ministry purposes, right? And by the way, we should be careful about complaining about how much money some preachers make. Like some large churches, you're like, oh, that guy, you know, he's rich because he's a preacher. Just to show how backward American Christians are, you have no problem with the money that the average NFL football player makes. But you're upset about a preacher getting paid well. Explain that to me. Explain to me why anybody in the NFL is worth $15 million a year. Right? Maybe Drake may, but the rest of them, no. Oh, sorry. Let my prejudice out. I'm a New England guy, but in all seriousness, it's a kid's game. Right? They're grown men. They act like it's a war. It's like, you know, it's an important, and this is important history. We're making history at the NFL this weekend. No, you're not. You're making entertainment. Undoubtedly, they're phenomenal athletes. But at the end of the day, what's the eternal value? What's the life-changing value? Right? If sports change people's lives, why are there so many felons in the NFL? Someone explain that one to me. I'm waiting for an answer still. And again, I'm not against the NFL. I mean, there are actual Christians in it, and there's, you know, there's a value to athletics, no question. But it's not the same as what an honest man of God can give. So I think we need to be very careful before we start slandering some preacher and acting like he's taking from the till. No, he may have a very prosperous church, and God bless him. You know, we shouldn't take that away from him. And so let's move on from this thought. Abraham was like his God. He was a giver because Abraham had faith in God as his provider. Genesis 15, verse 1.
Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great."
So this is right after he pays his tithe. God makes his promise to him. And we could have a testimony here, and there's people in this room undoubtedly that could share how their decision to support the work of the gospel financially resulted in them being blessed. And we're not making you a millionaire. We're not TV evangelists here saying you're going to make you give 100, you get 100-fold back. There's no guarantee on what God's going to give back, except that he will. We just don't know how that is. I believe that the reason my kids went to college for free was because I was a giver in the early days of my Christian life, and I didn't put any money away for their college. I just trusted that somehow God would provide for them, and they got military scholarships to go to college. Praise the Lord, I didn't have to pay for that. So you may say, well, that's just luck, or that's because you're white, or whatever. You know how people can be, right? We can be pretty petty. I always give it God the glory. And so I've suffered too, by the way. I've taken steps, I've taken down steps, sacrifices to be in the will of God, and so have many of you. Many of you have done that, and yet God somehow or other manages to still bless us. Isn't that weird? And so I don't want to get too far in the weeds on testimonies, but there are some people here that could you could talk to if you're struggling to believe God for this stuff, then you'll find out God has helped them. Okay, let's look at Philippians 4. Let's get into some New Testament principles. Philippians 4, 14 to 16, 17 to 18, and then 19 to 20. Right through, please.
Not that I seek a gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account. Indeed, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you, a sweet-smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. And my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. Now to our God and Father be glory forever and ever. Amen.
All right, so these Philippians are givers to Paul's ministry, and he makes that promise. God will supply all your needs. But some people quote this out of context, like, oh, God will supply all your needs. Well, he's talking only to a church that gave. Right? So there's some people, again, they're always on the receiving end. They always want to come into church, and they're on a handout all the time. Again, I understand we have needs sometimes. Sometimes, I may know that sometimes we abase and sometimes we abound. That word abase means sometimes we're struggling, we're going through a hard time. And we should help one another when that happens. Or if someone loses a job at the church, we ought to try to help them. Give them some work to do or a bag of groceries or whatever. But sometimes we abound. Other times in life, everything seems to be going very well. We have extra money in the bank, whatever. We all have these ups and downs. Every single person in this room does. And thank God for people that help. But again, there are some people, their whole life is a pity party of poverty. Oh, the kids are starving again this week. You've been a Christian for 5 years and you've been telling that story every week. Like somewhere along the line, you've missed something. Because God doesn't let us just get ground to the ground if we're really faithful. He's going to help us. And so this is just an area where the principle is connected. And look at the phrase they use there. We are to trust God for our needs. Giving to God by giving to a local church or minister is how the believer enters into the economy of God. So anyone that gave a little bit for the love offering for our evangelist that was here last week, you're actually investing in the economy of God. He's a full-time evangelist. He has he gets the only money he ever makes in life comes from these love offerings. Thank God for people like him. But now I want to be part of that economy, so I'm going to give a little bit into that love offering myself because I want to be part of his blessing. Proverbs 3, 9 to 10, and then Luke 6, 38. All right. Now, the interesting thing about that verse is if you posted that anywhere in public and asked people to guess who said it, they'd be like, oh, Benny Hinn or Joel Osteen, some TV evangelist, right? Some guy that's got a lot of wealth. No, Jesus said that. And he said that because he wants us to know that he will take care of us. Just do our part. He's not asking for us to give up everything, but he's asking us to give a little back into the kingdom so the kingdom business can expand and continue and be supported. Okay, know Abraham's example of generosity and hospitality in this story. Again, hospitality and generosity. So we're not just talking about giving at church. We're also talking about having a lifestyle of being generous and hospitable to people, where you actually are not holding back from blessing people. Genesis 18, 1 to 3, 4 to 5, and 6 to 8.
And the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground, and said, My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourself under the tree. And I will bring you a morsel of bread, and you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant. They said, Do as you say.
So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of the finest flour, and selected a choice, tender calf, and gave it to a servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and a calf that had been prepared, and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree.
All right, who knows what their resultant blessing was of this act of generosity to these 3 men? One of whom is described as the Lord. In other words, a theophany, an appearance of Christ in the Old Testament. What was the result? Who knows what happened right after this, Trayvon? The child. They were given the promise that by this time next year, you'll have a baby. Genesis 18, 9 to 10 and verse 14.
Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life and generosity I have done.
All right, so the promise of a child, they've been waiting and waiting, and now they're told by this time next year, you'll have a baby. Note in Philippians how God supplying all their needs is linked to their faithfulness in supporting his missionary ministry. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 to 7, and then 8, 9, 10 to 11, and then verse 12. Go ahead and read that.
But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver.
Verse 8.
And God said, And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have abundance for every good work.
As it is written, He has dispersed abroad, He has given to the poor, His righteousness endures forever.
Now may he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food supply and multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruit of your righteousness, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality, which causes thanksgiving through us to God.
For the administration of this service not only applies the needs of the saints, but also is abounding through many thanksgivings to God.
All right. So not only does it supply the needs for the saints, in other words, for the church needs, but it also applies it as a blessing to God, a blessing of thanksgiving. It's a show of thanksgiving toward God for his provision. All right, one last thing we'll close with, just because for technical reasons, we'll just go over these 3 terms. There are 3 terms used in the Bible for types of giving. There's tithes, offerings, and vows. Who knows? So we know what a tithe is, right? That's the first 10% of income that comes in. That's just a minimum standard of providing a support and acknowledging what your source is, where it came from. It's stewardship. What's an offering? What's that? How is that different than a tithe? Rob?
Offering is just something you want to give to support whatever you want.
Exactly. It's anything above that 10% that you just feel like giving. You feel generous today, and you want to be a blessing. So you give an offering. What's a vow? We call them pledges in the modern church. What's a vow, Matt? It's a commitment made to God, and it's usually for a specific purpose. So you say, you know what, if I get this job, I'm going to give $200 extra a month to the church. I'm making a pledge. I'm making a vow. Or if the church is like, hey, we need to get some new chairs for the church. Would anybody like to help pay for that? I'm going to pledge or make a vow that I'm going to give $400 toward that. That's specifically for the chairs. And so, or some other need that the church has, the missionaries or whatever. And so these are all different types of giving in the church. And you just pray to God and ask God for some direction on what you ought to do. Because you need to be faithful with your finances, and that means more than just balancing your checkbook or making sure you don't spend more than you make every month, right? It's actually your commitments to God are important. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close up this study here with, we've got a couple of minutes for questions or comments. Does anyone have a question or a comment? Anyone have a question or a comment? None. No one? Super boring or super interesting, one or the other. I don't know which it was. Austin.
What would you say to a person that's in a position, perhaps a new convert that doesn't have a job or work, that they can't give physical money to the church, but they have a heart to give? What could you say they can give instead, or just help them get a job so they can give?
Yeah, I want to be careful not to answer that question because some people always have an excuse why giving something other than money is more convenient or better or because of their situation. Like there's some guy that showed up for church a couple of months ago and he brought like broken stuff, a deflated volleyball and a Bible that had all the pages, whole chapters missing. He goes, I had these at home. I wanted to donate them to the church. Well, we did have to fill some extra space in the dumpster, so I really appreciated that offering. Right? Or people that are like, I've got this old TV set. I'm not using it anymore. I gave it up for Lent, so I want to donate. We don't need an old TV set, right? And so it's just that people. How many people have ever given to Salvation Army? Come on, I use this illustration all the time. We all have, right? You didn't give brand new clothes. Unless your aunt gave them to you for Christmas and you absolutely hate the color. But nobody goes to Walmart and buys new clothes and then turns around and drives to Salvation Army and donates them. You should, because that's what a real donation is. But we always have that one shirt. You could wear it one more time before it falls apart, or donate it. So you donate it. So I want to be careful not to answer that because I believe that I absolutely understand the nature of the question. Like there are new converts that come in. A lot of times they're just single men that have no jobs, nothing going on in their life, but they really got saved. They got pulled out of the street, and they're living at home with grandma or whatever, and they want to bring something. And so coming and helping out is always a good sign. People are willing to come and do real work, help out, clean a toilet, whatever. We'll never say no to that kind of help because we need it. We need it, and that's a blessing. But most people, they could give something. If you're living with grandma, she's probably giving you a little bit because you seem to be not malnourished. Right? Do we see a lot of poor, skinny people here? Not really. Like, even the poorest people in America have some kind of, thank God, they have some kind of program that's probably helping them get on their feet or carry them along. They could give a little bit from that. And so that's why I'm leery to really give you an answer because I don't want people's junk donated to my church. But that's a fair question to ask. No question about it. Anthony?
So this kind of ties into the last night revival and this morning. Like there was the revivalist mentioned sometimes families disagree,
Yeah.
and how do you like deal with it, like tithing or like a situation that the family disagrees with? Like the revivalist is saying sometimes you have to go out on your own.
Yeah. So there's the biggest conflict is usually with a husband and a wife where one is saved and one's not. And that's usually the most common. I mean, there's other examples too we could use, but that's the most common one. All I know is any money that you could control, you're responsible for. So if it's money you personally make and you know you need to give, then you should give with it. If your spouse controls the money, this is more likely the case. I would tell any man, you just need to get a handle on things, bro. Like, if she's managing all your money, then and she don't want to give, there's something wrong there. Like, you need to just man up and say, we're going to support the church. But some wives absolutely have no control over their finances because their husband is one of these guys that, 11 secret bank accounts, and she doesn't even get to see the money. There are some marriages like that, and you can only give what you have the power to give. So whether people are ideologically in agreement with the doctrine is not important. The most important thing is there is something that you can control, that you will be accountable to God for, that you ought to say, I can decide, this is all I get to decide about, but I'll decide right with this little bit I have. All right? All right, we're going to have to close because it's right at 1 minute to 11, and we're going to try to start on time today. And so I appreciate your support. You can always ask me questions after service or call me. But we're going to go ahead and take a break for 1 minute for the bathroom break. Are we doing children's Sunday school this morning? Yes, we are. So you want to send the kids to the back room. And worship team, you need to get up here. We're going to get started in about 4 minutes. So we want to be on time today. I appreciate your faithfulness. And I'm going to ask if my brother Luke would close us up in a word of prayer.